Good morning, everybody. Let's stand again at time of worship this morning.
Praises rising, eyes are turning to you. We turn to you. Hope is stirring, our hearts are yearning for you. We long for you, 'cause when we see you, we find strength to face the day. In your presence, all our fears are washed away. They're washed away. Hosanna, Hosanna. You are the God who saves us, worthy of all our praises. And Hosanna, Hosanna. Come have your way. Welcome you here, Lord Jesus. Hear the sounds of hearts returning to you. Return to you. Broken lives are made new. You make us new. 'Cause when we see you, we find strength to face the day. In your presence, all our fears are washed away. They're washed away. Hosanna, Hosanna. You are the God who saves us, worthy of all our praises. And Hosanna, Hosanna. And come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus. When we see you, we find strength to face the day. In your presence, all our fears are washed away. 'Cause when we see you, we find strength to face the day. In your presence, all our fears are washed away. They're washed away. Hosanna, Hosanna. You are the God who saves us, worthy of all our praises. And Hosanna, Hosanna. Come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus. And come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus. And come have your way among us. We welcome you here, Lord Jesus.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cornerstone. We're so happy to see everybody here. why don't we take a minute to say good morning to someone maybe you haven't seen for a while or someone you'd like to say hello to. So, and for those of you joining us online, we're so happy that you can worship with us this morning in this way. And remember that you can connect with us through the comment section below or privately through our website, cbctoday.com/connect. We'd love to hear from you. Maybe come visit one day, but we're so thankful to God for the technology that we have, that we can share the message in this time of worship with you. And for those of you here, remember that you can connect with us as well via the connection cards located under the seats in front of you. And let us know if there's any burden in your life right now and you're in need of prayer. Just share that with us. There's some amazing prayer warriors here in this church family, and we'd love to know how we can be praying for you in this way. So we're going to continue with our time of worship, and this is just a perfect time to reaffirm our relationship with God and remind us to focus our hearts and minds on His Word. It's time to strip away everything that gets in the way of our relationship with Him, surrendering everything at that door to just spend time with Him. So even if singing is not your thing, like it is for so many people here, just say the words of this song, hear them in your heart, and really mean them as prayers to God.
Surrender it all to Thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender all. Go to God in prayer this morning. God, I pray that it really is our heart as we surrender ourselves to you, God, as all of us are coming in this morning with different things on our mind. Some are good things, some are things that we are excited about. God, we also have some worries and some struggles and some hurt that have come in this morning as well. And as we just sang about, we want to surrender those to you right now. Surrender is a hard thing for a lot of us to do, to completely just turn something over and fall into that trust that we have and that comfort that we have and the security that we have in you. But God, this morning I pray that we challenge people to surrender whatever they are dealing with and turn it over to you, God. Create within us, as the psalmist writes, God, create within us a clean heart this morning, a pure mind this morning. God, help us to learn something this morning. God, help us to remember the truths from your word that we will be going over this morning. Bless this time of worship. God, create within us a spirit of worship, a heart of worship, Jesus. As we sing these songs out to you, as we get ourselves ready and prepared to experience your word this morning. God, thank you for this time of worship, so we can sing and to praise you. In your name, amen. When the music fades and all is stripped away, and I simply come, longing just to bring to something that's of worth, that would bless your heart. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, where it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it. When it's all about you, it's all about you, Jesus. King of endless worth, no words could express how much you deserve. Though I'm weak and poor, all I have is yours, but every single breath. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the things I've made it. When it's all about you, it's all about you, Jesus. And I'm coming back to the heart of worship, when it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. And I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I made it. When it's all about, it's all about you, Jesus. It's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. Let's go to God in prayer this morning. God, again, I pray that we truly mean that with the words that we're singing, that we will commit ourselves to experiencing your word this morning. God, create within us a clean heart, a pure spirit, a mind that's ready to receive your word and to learn this morning. Let everything we do and say bring honor, bring glory, and bring blessing to you. In your name, amen. I was only alive for 8 months of the 70s, but that has a very 70s feel, doesn't it? That was like an old classic police show or something from the 70s. All right. Good morning, everybody. We are continuing talking about when life gives you lemons. It's just what I came up with. Kind of, to be honest, I went with the video. I was like, oh, there's just lemons in the background, so it kind of worked. Because we're talking about things when things don't necessarily go the way that we expect them to go in our lives. And we've all faced that in different times, different trials and seasons of our lives. Things have been going a certain direction, and things happen. It completely changes your world. And sometimes it's a good thing because sometimes good things happen. Where we're going a certain direction, maybe we get the job that we've really wanted, or we finally earn that degree that we've been striving so hard to get. And so when those things happen, those are good things. But most of the time, what takes our focus is when unexpected things happen in our lives and throws that wrench into our lives. You know, the saying is, when life gives you lemons, you make what? Lemonade, right? And that's totally fine. And we've been talking about this last couple weeks, what to do when things happen. And so I have to start this morning. The fastest way, to set this event a little bit, the fastest way to kill something that's really good is to start to compare it to something else. So we're going to talk about comparison this morning. We're going to talk about, some jealousy. We're going to talk about envy a little bit this morning, some really great truths that the Bible teaches about not being envious and not comparing ourselves. And we're going to use some scripture this morning to show that. And when I talk about comparing, I'll give you some examples. Sometimes we might compare ourselves to others around us who have more stuff. Now, we have so much stuff with a family of 5 with 3 little kids, and I know some of you have been there or are there now. We have more stuff than you can shake a stick at, and we have sticks that you can shake at that stuff as well. We literally just bought a walking stick for our one son, because he had to have a walking stick. Even though we have woods behind us, he can make his own walking stick. We bought him a walking stick. We just added to the stuff that we have already. And so, but sometimes we do that. We see, and with those around us, it could be your neighbors, it could be family, right? It could be friends. Someone just drive by their house and they have the nicest stuff. Heather and I have been a lot of pool envy lately, especially with the heat of the summer that we've had. And we've been talking about eventually getting a pool. And every time we drive past a pool, and we try not to do it out of an envious spirit, but we go, wow, it looks really nice. Wow, I bet that'd be really refreshing. Wow, it must be really nice to have not only a pool, but an in-ground pool, and you can lay around the pool, right? We all do it. We see people's stuff, and we say, wow, I wish I had something, or maybe one day I'll have that. And it's not just what someone has. Maybe it's where people go. Some might say, hey, listen, my friends, I don't understand. I don't know when they work, but they're on the 3rd vacation in the summer. I'm working on just getting a weekend off, and they're on their 3rd vacation this morning. And so we might have a little bit envy of that. And not just what someone has, not just maybe places where they're able to go, but things they're able to do, and just the attributes and skills and talents that person may have. You know, I really wish, especially in the last few months, I really wish I had the ability to fix my own car. I'm talking about engine work especially, but also body work and brakes and all that. And if you have that talent and ability, talk to me afterwards, because I'd love to get your opinion on a couple of things. Because our cars, at one point this week, we had 2 of 3, which is envious in itself, right? But 2 or 3 of our vehicles were in shops getting various work done. my wife's car. We've had it so many times over the last few months, over the last 6 months actually, and it's back at a dealership again. And I'm so envious, right? And when someone's able to just look at something and be able to say, well, that's what it is. In fact, we picked up my truck yesterday, which I've had for, if my truck was a child, my truck would be going to college this year. My truck is 18 years old. I love that old truck. I drove again this morning. It's funny, I got in the truck with the boys, drove them here this morning. They have little fold-out seats in the back, you know. And we're getting in the car, and I start talking about it, and they said, Dad, how long have you had this truck? I said, well, if it was a kid, I've made the joke, they didn't get it. So if it was a kid, they would go to college. And I said, I've had it for 18 years. They say, you know why we know that you've had this truck for so long? I'm like, why? He's like, because you tell so many stories, you have so many stories about your truck. You tell us about your trips you've gone on and things you've done and stuff. And, but yesterday we picked it up from just an inspection. And the guy said to us, he's like, didn't you have me here last year for brakes? Oh, no, you did the brakes yourself, right? And I laughed out loud. No, I did not do the brakes myself. But you know what? I'm sometimes envious, and I wish I had some of the talents that some of you I know have to be able to fix cars and look at a situation like that and fix it. I'm not necessarily mechanically inclined. I could say the same thing about those of you who can cook. We have some really, really good chefs and cooks in this house and bakers in this church as well. And I love to cook. My wife will tell you she wants me to cook all the time just because she needs a break from it sometimes. But I love to cook. I enjoy cooking. But I am not a gourmet chef. We actually have gourmet chefs in this church, just so you know. I'm not going to point them out right now. But if you want to know who it is afterwards, I'll absolutely tell you. I wish I had the ability just to take any raw ingredient and make whatever I want to make it taste so good. You know what? We have others that I wish I could build things. I wish I could just, I'm not talking mechanical stuff, I wish I could just look at something and just build it. Take some wood, take some hammer and nails, a saw like some of you can, and just build things. I want to get there, and I'm starting to do it a little bit. I'm so proud of myself. I have a couple of saws now, and I even got saw horses, so I can look fancy when I do it, right? You're going to laugh at them, but I have saw horses. And I wish, and I'm working on that skill and ability, but I sometimes envious when people can do those things. And not just those types of talents, but what about people that can sing, play an instrument? I've always been jealous of people who can dance. I inherited my father's ability when it came to, not necessarily rhythm, we all know that that's not true, but at least his ability to dance. My dad could not dance whatsoever. He used to dance in the kitchen with my mom. That was usually the extent of their dancing together. And I wish, I've done a lot of weddings over the years, photography. And I've been to so many weddings, and I've seen so many great dancers at weddings. And you know that time of the night when you go to a wedding and the music's playing and it's just people are just having fun and dancing and just, I have always envied their ability to just go out there with no regard for how they look, how foolish they may look or how good they may look, and just dance their heart out. Some of us might say, I wish I've had more success in my business that I've started, you know, and I've started and still doing okay, but others that have worked around me, others have started businesses around me, seem to be much more successful. You know, some might say, I wish I had more success or more ability to move up within my own job, my company I work for, and I've been there a long time, and others around me have been able to be promoted, and I'm still kind of in the same level. So there might be some jealousy around that. You might even take it the next step and say, I wish I'm not making money like others do, right? I don't have the same finances, the same resources, so therefore I'm not able to afford, you know, the cars or the bigger house. You see, we all have faced it and faced it every day of our lives, this idea of comparing ourselves to others. Nothing wrong with striving, nothing wrong with putting your head down and getting to work. But when it comes to comparison can be a very bad thing for us. And sometimes you might find yourself saying, I can't do what that person does. I can't build like that person builds. I can't sing like that person sings. I can't build a business and make money like that person does. I can't do what they do. And the reason, here you go, the reason you can't do what someone else can do is because you weren't called to their purpose. We're going to talk about purpose again this week. Last week we started talking about finding our reason or finding our purpose, and we're going to continue doing that this morning. But again, the reason you can't do what someone else is doing or can do is because you weren't actually called to their purpose. They have their own race that we'll get to that they're running. Well, let's open this morning in a word of prayer, inviting God to really speak to us, the Holy Spirit to come in this place, and maybe reveal some truths to us this morning. God, thank you for the opportunity we have to be in your home and to be in your house and to open your word together, to learn from its truth, God, and most importantly, to apply it then to our lives. And God, help us to recognize some things that we are talking about this morning, those things that are applicable to us. Help us to recognize that and not turn away from it, not be discouraged by it, but use it as a motivation for us to make our lives strive to live our life more according to what your will, what your plan, what your purpose for us really is. So God, be with us this morning. Bless your word as we read it this morning together. In your name, amen. So we are in this series, I'm again calling it Life Gives You Lemons. The first week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about sometimes when God preps us and prepares us for something, it sometimes comes packaged as pain. It's not necessarily a great thing, a good thing to go through. It could be a painful experience for us to go through. But through that, God sometimes is preparing us for something new, something great. And then last week, we talked about, again, finding our reason, or another word for reason would be purpose, finding our purpose. It's that lifelong, people have used philosophy for generations and centuries now. What is the purpose of life? What is the meaning of life? And they spend so much time and energy when the Bible is very specific, and they have to search very far. Remember last week we said, your purpose is not for you. That's a very worldly concept. Purpose is for you. Do you. Just do whatever makes you happy, whatever makes you comfortable. If it doesn't hurt others, you might as well just do it. And that sounds great, but that's actually not what the Bible tells us. So our purpose is not for us. Our purpose is to serve our God. Our purpose is for God. Another thing we learned last week, you don't find your purpose. We spend so much time searching and wondering what our purpose is on this earth. We are not to necessarily find our purpose. We are simply to serve God's purposes for us, which in essence is obviously discovering and staying connected with God and being in tune to what God has in your life, but then following His purpose. And if you want to serve God's purpose, if you want to do what God wants you to do and you're struggling to see what that is, all you have to do, the starting point for finding God's purpose in your life is to simply start serving God's people. When you start serving God's people, and what does that mean? Doing what Christ has asked us to do, go into the world, tell people about the saving knowledge of Jesus, but then demonstrate His love, demonstrate His compassion, teach about sin, teach about the turning away from the sin in your lives, and also demonstrating the love of Christ. So if you want to find God's purpose, you want to go in that direction. We talked about this last week, but start by simply doing what God asked us to do and start serving God's people. This week, I simply titled this No Comparison. All right, so there's no comparison. And again, it's the idea of not comparing ourselves to others around us. Not comparing ourselves because they are running their own race. They have their own purpose. They have their own end game in mind. And God has a unique purpose and perspective from them, which is going to be different than our purpose. So no comparison. Because when we compare ourselves with others, we will always end up feeling incomplete. Let me say that again. When we compare ourselves to others, when we say, I want to do what they are doing, I want to accomplish what they have accomplished, I want to earn what they have earned, I want to have what they have. When we start doing that in our lives, we will always feel incomplete because initially we go into their lane of the race and then we don't ever cross our own path. And then we're always left wondering, why don't I feel complete? It's because we're not running the race that we should be running. So this week, we're focusing on not comparing, again, ourselves to others. And I want to talk about two truths about you, two things about you that are true. Now, I know some of you very well. Some of you I don't know as well as others. But I guarantee that these are applicable to you because they're true for me. They're true for you. Two truths about your life. And when you recognize and understand and are reminded of what these truths are, hopefully allow you to stop the comparison game, hopefully allow you to really focus on your race, on your purpose, on your goal that God has for you, your life, I should say, that God has for you. So number one this morning, you are perfectly created by God to fulfill God's purpose for you. I'll say it again. You are perfectly created by God to fulfill God's purpose for you. The book of Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. Most of us know this verse. I've heard this verse many times. It starts off verse 10. For we are God's masterpiece. Let's stop at that word masterpiece for just a moment. Masterpiece, the Greek word for masterpiece, comes from the word poema. Poema. And poema is actually, in the Greek, is where we actually get our word poetry from. Makes sense, right? Sounds very similar, poema. And if the real definition of poema or masterpiece is God's poetic statement. You know, when you think of masterpiece, and it's a great word within itself, a masterpiece is when you have an artist, when you have someone with talents and abilities. Think of a painter, think of a sculptor. And when they create a masterpiece, it is what they are known for. They put their heart and energy and soul and blood and sweat and tears into whatever that is. And they are, in essence, known for that work. It is their master creation. And when people think of Michelangelo, people think of Leonardo, I always think of Ninja Turtles, but some of you might think of some artists, right? Some sculptors, some painters, some things in their lives that, and centuries ago, that their name still was. Think of Michelangelo. What do you think of? You think of what? What do you think of when you think of Michelangelo? Not the Ninja Turtle. What do you think of? Sistine Chapel, right? When you think of Leonardo, what do you think of? Nothing? How about David? Right? Right? When you start thinking of these artists, did I get that right? I believe I did. When you think of artists, I got to take my art people in the back. You think of their masterpieces that they have created. Ephesians 2 says, we are God's masterpieces. In other words, he could have created anything in this world, and he did. He created everything. But we are his masterpiece. Of everything that he has created, we are the best. We are the thing that he's most proud of. We are the things that he loves the most. And it continues, he has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. We are God's masterpiece. Everything that God creates, he creates for a purpose. Everything in this world that he has created from the beginning of time, he's created for a purpose. And that very much includes you and I. Do you remember that bumper sticker from back in the day? It says, God don't make no junk. Anybody see that? That includes you. And the reason I say that, because we also live in a time, and this is not new for us, but I feel it's become more and more prevalent, where people are having a hard time thinking about not only their purpose, but thinking about what's the point of life anymore. And I'm talking about those who might fall into depression. I'm talking about those who might feel so isolated, and they wonder, why am I here? I saw an interview with this young woman. They were interviewing her on the street. She was at some protest, and they said to her, it was an abortion protest, and she was a pro-choice person. And the interviewer said to her, you were born, so they're making the argument that if you're born, you don't have a right to argue pro-choice. But she said, I wish I wasn't born. And it actually caught the interviewer off guard. He said, what do you mean? She goes, I wish that I was never born. I find no purpose in my life. My life is hard, it's difficult, it's painful. I don't like being in this world. And it was the saddest thing in the world to hear, because she verbalized what I know a lot of people think in their heads and think in their minds. But God don't make no junk. Your birth is evidence that your purpose is necessary. The very fact that you were born into this world, the very fact that that Creator created you, is evidence that you have a purpose in this world. Your purpose, and you were necessary. If you weren't necessary, in other words, you wouldn't have been born. There is no substitute for you. You might have brothers and sisters. You might have other people that you're very close with. I actually literally have a twin brother, which most of you know that. But he's still not me. He's still got his unique DNA. He's still got a uniqueness that makes him him and me. There is nobody else like you on this earth. There's no substitute, which means there's no one else in this world that can fulfill God's purpose for you in this world, because they have their own. You are created by God, for God, to do everything for his glory. And that's where a lot of us, we talked about last week, the purpose. Our purpose is not to find ourselves. Our purpose is to serve God's purpose in this world. And we talked about this, again, it's a very kind of worldly concept that I'm going to try to do things in this world to impress other people, to accomplish great things, so my name is going to be known. And those things can and do happen to followers of Christ, absolutely. There have been many Christians and believers over the years that their names live on for centuries because of what they have done. But their purpose wasn't to leave that legacy. Their purpose was was to serve God's purpose on this world. It just so happens what God had them do in this world, maybe it left their name to be a legacy that people remember. But our purpose is not for the glory of everybody in this world, not to impress people, not to please them. It's to serve our God. Because you can even ask, who are them? Who are they? What is our purpose of trying to please others? Comparison. Comparison is the enemy of your calling. And we've all done it. We've all had those times and places and situations in our lives where we compare ourselves to others. We say things like, if only I had blank, whatever this is for you, if only I had this blank, then I would be happy. I'll raise my hand and say, I've done that many, many times. If only I had this, whether it's money, a lot of us may think if I've had more money, it hasn't always been money for me. If only I had this, if only if I could dance, if only if I had the courage to do this, if only I had this or this in my life, if only I had this, I would be happy. Now, why are we saying that? Because we see others with that, and we feel because they have that, they are happy, they are content. That's comparison. So if only I had this, I would be happy. If only blank, if only this was different in my life, I would be successful. I would feel content. And again, fill in that blank, whatever it may be for you. If only this blank was different in my life, I would be successful. It's comparison. No, don't get me wrong. God sometimes gives you a calling. Sometimes God lays a burden or direction in your life and something to strive for. He wants you to be more confident in this. He wants you to learn this. And that's great. And if God's leading you to learn new things, absolutely learn and lead new things. But what I'm saying is when we are comparing to others and out of a sense of envy, out of a sense of, if I had this, then this would be better, then we're comparing, and comparison is the enemy of the calling that God has for us. And beyond just talents, beyond just abilities, and beyond just the ability to sing or dance or build things, right, or fix your own car, I'm talking also about our spiritual gifts as well. If only I was more confident in my faith, right? If only I had the ability, if I could speak to other people, if only I could be more compassionate. We start comparing spiritual gifts to this as well. And we also all know that each one of us as followers of Christ have unique spiritual gifting that is for us. Now, some of us have the same spiritual gifting, right? Some of us have the same spiritual gifts, but when we start comparing to others, saying, I wish I was more this or wish I was more that, we are comparing. Comparison is the enemy of God's calling for you. I love this verse in Psalms chapter 139, verse 14. I'll read a couple different versions of it. This is the NKJV, the New King James Version. It says, I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. We know that verse, right? I like the New American Standard Version of that as well. And so where the NKJV says, I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made, the New American says this, I will give thanks to you, speaking of God, because I am awesomely and wonderfully made. I love that word awesomely. It's more attributed to our language nowadays. We use the word awesome to describe so many things. I went to school and lived several years in outside Boston in Massachusetts. We use the word awesome in a lot of different contexts up there, right? It's a very unique word for our generation. And what does it mean to you? Awesome just means it's beyond great. It's beyond good. It's like the best of the best. It makes you feel so good. And God said again, David says to God, I will give thanks to you because I am awesomely and wonderfully made. You know, that's a great verse, Psalms 139, verse 14. It's a great verse for you to remember, for me to remember. When we go through the seasons and times and days and minutes and hours of our lives where we just kind of sit and ponder and wonder, why am I here? What's the purpose of even continuing? Why do we even try? Some of you might have been there. Some of you might be there right now. You wake up and you just kind of sit up in bed and say, why are I even trying to move today? What's the purpose? Everything I try to do, I don't seem to be successful in it. The things I do in my life to try and bring some happiness and joy into my life never seem to work out. I put so much work and effort into my job, into my responsibilities, and I don't ever seem to get ahead. I put so much effort and work into my relationships and try to make them stronger, but they never seem to be stronger. I try to have an end game. I try to have a focus. I never seem to be able to focus. And some of you might get up and say, well, what's the point? Why am I doing this? What's the point of even continuing? Psalms 139:14, as a follower of Christ, I will give thanks to you because I am awesomely and wonderfully made. God doesn't make junk. God did not make a mistake when he made you. There's no one else on this earth that can fulfill God's purpose that he has for you. And you can't fulfill anybody else's purpose as well. You are uniquely and wonderfully created by the Creator, who sees you as his masterpiece, the thing that he's most proud of everything that he's created in this world. He chose us as his masterpiece. We are his finest and most proudest creation. The problem is self-doubt. Self-doubt will always stand in the way of your ability to fulfill God's purpose in your life. Self-doubt, doubting yourself, right? They're very easy to translate. What does self-doubt mean? It means your doubt, you discredit, you think negative about who you are. Self-doubt will always stand in the way, again, of your ability to fulfill God's purpose in your life. Self-doubt is a tool that Satan himself uses to discourage you, tries to use to discredit you, tries to use to distract you from your purpose on this earth. Self-doubt many times turns into resentment, resenting the way that your life has turned out compared to others around you. I remember, and I'll be honest with you and some things in my life, and a number of years ago, probably about 7, 8 years ago, and I didn't remember this. My mom shared it with me recently, and I was going through, things, and actually, I would say it's even longer than that, because I think it was before we were married. So a lot longer than 13 years, right? We've been married for 13 years. I'm not asking. I'm kind of, yes, 13 years. And I remember, I said to my mom at one point, we're talking about future and talking. I don't know what situation I was in. And I guess I said to her, you know what I see myself, Mom, in the future doing? I don't really know what God's actually calling me to do anymore. I think what I'm going to do is whatever Seth is doing, my brother's doing, whatever ministry that he's leading, I'm going to be his right hand. I'm going to work with him. I'm going to help him any way I can. And that's what I think my purpose is. And there's nothing wrong with that purpose. But she knew that wasn't God's plan for me. She knew that God had other things in store in my life. So recently, in the last few months, we were talking about it, and she shared that with me. She goes, I don't know if you ever remembered this, but there's a time you came to me and you felt your purpose was basically to work alongside your brother. And that's not a bad purpose. She goes, but I know, and your father knew, that there were God had so much great things and wonderful things ready for you. And we've prayed for them before you guys were born, that God would use you. And we surrendered you and your brother, to him way before we even found out that we were going to have you. And most of you know the story. My parents, for 7 years, tried to have children. Were told they could never have kids. Countless doctors told her, you'll never have children. You shouldn't even think about it. You should put it out of your mind. It will never happen for you. And they sat down and they prayed together. And this happened more than once. They would kneel in their living room and they would pray and pray. And they finally said, God, if you give us a son, right, singular, if you give us a son, we will give him back to you. We will raise him to honor you and to glorify you. We will surrender him to you so that you would use him and give him back to you and hopefully use in ministry. And very, very shortly after that prayer happened, they found out that they were having a baby. And pretty soon after that, they found out they were having two. And then we were born, and they found out we had 2 sons. Talk about pressure. Before you're even born, finding out that you've already been dedicated and prayed over. But even with all of that preparation, and I think it's very important, we're going to talk about this, parent this morning. And if your kids are already grown, this is very much still applicable to you. You are praying for your children each and every day. If you're still raising them in your home, you're raising them in a home that's going to honor and going to glorify their Creator, God. And when you do that, when you set that precedent in your family, in your home, it's going to ripple out over the effects of their lives. Now, my life has not been exactly probably what my parents had planned, and just in terms of some struggles and growth that I had to go to, right, like all of us do. It definitely wasn't just the perfect, like, oh, as soon as I was born, I never made a mistake in my life and end up in the position I'm in now. Absolutely not. We've all made mistakes in our lives. But the point is, my purpose in this life has been defined to me. And when I get off that track of what I should be doing, I also know that I need to get back on that track to fulfill that purpose. My purpose in life is not to run my brother's race. My purpose in my life is not to finish my father's race. My purpose in my life is to finish my race. Comparison gets in the way of that. It distracts us. It discourages us. It causes self-doubt. It causes anger, causes resentment. So again, self-doubt then turns into resentment, resenting the way your life has compared to others. Again, Satan likes to make you feel this way. Satan loves to isolate you and to make you feel isolated. In other words, make you feel like you're the only one in this whole entire world that is experiencing what you are experiencing right now. If you're going through self-doubt, if you're going through comparison, Satan will tell you, you're the only one. You realize everybody else has it under control. You messed up. You are the only one experiencing self-doubt right now. You're the only one that's not doing what your God wants you to do, and you should be ashamed of that. And then that leads to what? It leads to depression. It leads to discouragement. It leads you to completely walk away from the path that God has for you because you feel like you're not even worthy to be on that path. Isolation is a terrible, terrible thing. And that lie from Satan is a lie straight from the pit of hell. Because each one of us, doesn't matter where you're at in your life, each one of you is uniquely, awesomely made. You are the masterpiece of God the Creator. You are the thing that He is the most proud of all the things that He's created, all the wonders of the world itself, of everything in this world. You are the most important. I am the most important. We are His masterpiece. God has made you an awesome, unique person that you are. In comparison, can kill and destroy that purpose. And number one, again, you are perfectly created by God to fulfill God's purpose for you. Number two, this morning, you can't fulfill God's purpose for you when you're comparing to someone else's. We've talked about this. Let's get into it a little bit more. Again, you can't fulfill God's purpose for you. You can't, in other words, run your race when you're stepping on someone else's line. So let's talk about a couple of examples of that this morning. Book of John, chapter 20. John and Peter, a couple of the followers of Jesus, had this little rivalry going. They're constantly comparing themselves to each other. In John chapter 20, John actually, who wrote the book, talks about himself in the third person. He actually uses the phrase, the one Jesus loved. Okay? Just so you can see where his head is at. He calls himself the one that Jesus loved. Here's a context of what we're about to read. In John chapter 20, early in the morning, Mary had visited the tomb of Jesus. This is right after the crucifixion in the morning of the resurrection. Mary had visited Jesus' tomb and she discovered that he wasn't there. Ran back to all of his followers, ran back to everyone and said, the tomb is empty. And we're about to read this story, but I want you to take note as I read this. Notice how many times John, right, he describes himself as the one that Jesus loved, how many times he says that he is faster than Peter, all right? So here we go, John chapter 20, we're going to read verse 2 through 4, and then skip ahead to 6 and 8. So she, Mary, came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, that's John, this is John writing, and said, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. So there's a little panic here. They shouldn't have been panicked, by the way. This is not the Easter service, but we all know, right? They shouldn't have been surprised because Jesus is exactly doing what he said he was going to do. Well, let's go ahead. So they had taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. Verse 3, so Peter and the other disciples started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. For those of you who have multiple children that were kind of close in age like I have with my boys, everything turns into a competition, all right? And so Peter and John turned this into a competition. Who can run, who can reach the tomb faster? So both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. Then Simon Peter came along behind him, went straight into the tomb. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. John compared himself to Peter. Peter likes to compare himself to John. And you might do the same thing this morning as well. Moms, you might be comparing yourselves to other moms and saying, wait, listen, other moms seem to be in control. They seem to have their kids in order. They seem to have all their ducks in a row. I wish that I could be more like that. I wish I could be more prepared and more leading with my children. Dads, we do the same thing. I wish that I could teach my kids more. I wish I could be sometimes a better example for them. We do that in our relationship. We do that in our marriages. We say things like, oh, that couple seems to never have a fight. I don't think they've ever had an ill word with each other. And it seems like in my relationship, we're constantly at arms with each other and we're constantly fighting. I'm not talking about us, by the way. This is just an example, right? But it seems like other couples seems always to have it in control. And why do we seem like we're struggling? They seem to go on dates. They have family devotions. They go on walks. They even hold hands with each other as they walk. I mean, they got everything under control. How come we don't do that? We start comparing. This world nowadays with influencers, and if you know what that is, you know what it is. If you don't know what it is, I don't know how to explain it to you because it's the most crazy, asinine thing ever. But this idea that you are popular by the amount of people that follow you on a social network, and if none of you know what a social network is, I really don't know how to explain it to you. Think Facebook, think Instagram, think Twitter, think, Snapchat, think TikTok. I can't do TikTok either. Think about those things. When you have a number of followers, they start to call you. I don't know what the number is, but they start to call you a social influencer. That's very fancy, right? All it means you got a bunch of people following you. And the problem with it is it becomes a race within itself. And people will want to, they feel more ahead, the more followers that they have, the more influence they have on others. And man, our world is just bent on influence right now. Who follows who, and how many people do you have that listen to you? And influencers also, like a lot of things, like if I had more influencers, I might be able to get more sponsors. In other words, people give me free stuff. And so it's turned into this game. And to be honest, I think it's very, very bad for our emotional state of our kids. I think it leads to a lot of psychological stuff later on. And I think years from now, as this is just starting now, I think years from now, we're going to see more and more negative influence from that. But we all do it. John compares himself to Peter. Peter compared himself to John. Peter, by the way, who had denied Jesus before the crucifixion, right? He denied Jesus. And after the resurrection, he had a very powerful encounter with the risen Christ. And in the context of what he said, Jesus says to Peter, says, do you love me? A rhetorical question. Jesus says to Peter, do you love me? If you remember Peter's response, Peter says, absolutely, I love you. I want to follow you. You're the risen Son of God. And then Jesus says, if you love me, this is your calling. This is what I want you to do. I want you to feed my sheep. I wasn't talking about literally going out to a pasture somewhere and feeding sheep. Who were his sheep? The followers of Christ. I want you to pour into them. I want you to preach the good news of this gospel, of the resurrection, of what you've just witnessed and what you know. I want you to feed the sheep. I want you to nurture them. I want them to grow. I want this following to move forward. And it happens, Peter, when you feed my sheep. Peter, that is your calling. Now back to John chapter 21 now. Peter turned around and saw behind him the disciple that Jesus loved, John, okay? Peter asked Jesus, he says, what about him, Lord? What about John? You've told me why my purpose is, but what about his purpose? Why is he still left here? Jesus replied, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? It's a bold thing that, Jesus can say whatever he wants, but that's a very bold thing that he said back to Peter. In other words, when he says, what is that to you? In other words, what he's saying is, why is that your business what my purpose for him is? Why is that your business, what I choose to do or not do with him? Maybe I'll have him stay alive until I actually come back again, but that's none of your business. What is that to you? As for you, Peter, this is all you got to worry about. Don't worry about John, the one that I love. Don't worry about any of the other disciples. Don't worry about Mary. Don't worry about anybody else. All you need to worry about is the purpose that I have for you. I've called you to feed my sheep. That's your calling. That's your prerogative. That's what you need to do. As for you, follow me, feed my sheep. Stop comparing your calling. Stop comparing what you weren't designed to accomplish. The grass is not greener on the other side. That person that you might be looking at their life saying they have everything together, they're looking at someone else's life and saying they got everything together. That person you're looking at and you're saying they have all the financial means they could ever need, that person is saying, I wish I had all the money to get everything I ever need. The person you're saying they have the best relationship, they never get in a fight with their spouse, they're saying they have the best relationship, man, they never get in a fight with their spouse. Stop playing the comparing game. Comparing leads to resentment. Resentment starts feelings of isolation. Isolation leads you to distract and discourage you and discredit you from the calling and the purpose that God has for your life. You can't fulfill God's purpose for you when you're comparing to someone else. The fastest way to kill something special is to compare it. Comparison leads to resentment. Resentment leads to doubt. Doubt can lead to an unfulfilled purpose. You're perfectly created by God to fulfill God's purpose for you. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. I have it sitting in front of my computer in my desk at home. I look at it every single day. It's on the baton that my dad gave to me. It says this, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Now, I've read that verse many, 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 many times. I've heard it read to me many, 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 many times. But this time it really struck me different. The race marked out for us. In other words, God marked out a line for us to follow. He marked out a path. He would show us the path of life, Psalm 16:11. He's marked out a purpose, a path for each one of us. The race marked out before us. Number 2, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Let us run with perseverance, fixing our eyes on Jesus, not running to please the person next to us, not running to accomplish a goal that's someone else's goal for their life, not running to please people. It's impossible to win someone else's race. Someone else has a race that's specific for them. Now, all might look like you're lined up at the same line, you're all going the same direction, but you all have different purposes, you all have different goals, or different things, in other words, that God has for you to accomplish. And if your eyes are fixed on what their goals are, you're going to completely miss the mark that God has for you. It's impossible to win someone else's race. And the fastest way to lose the race is to look behind you or to try to look next to you. My dad was an avid runner. He'd always explain to me in a race, we'd watch the Olympics or watch some event, whatever, and he'd say, listen, as people are running, notice when they're running, they do not turn their head from their goal in front of them. Now, sometimes they did, and he would show me this. Sometimes they would glance to the side to see who was next to them. He said, but every time they do that, they risk taking their eyes off that line, and that split second where they turn their head, or in some cases completely turn their head around to see who's behind them, they can start to lose some momentum. And in some cases, they actually lose the race altogether, because that split-second difference of them turning their head caused someone else who did not have their head turned, had kept their eyes focused on that line, was able to pass by them and complete the race before them. The fastest way to lose this race in life is to look behind you or to look next to you. You need to look forward. And realize when things happen with people, when people beside you, neighbors, friends, family, whoever it is, and they seemingly have things in their life that you wish that you can have. And when you start that comparison in your life, you're essentially switching into their lane. And therefore, you're never going to fulfill the purpose and the promise that God has for you. It's not your race, not for your calling. Nobody, because here's the other thing, nobody can run your race for you. You are uniquely, wonderfully, awesomely made. Only you can finish the purpose God has for your life. So keep your eyes fixed forward. I have a very simple thing in my life that I'm trying to make sure that I'm focused on. I have a lot of things, like a lot of us do, a lot of things try to distract us, a lot of things that I'm involved in. And life can be, for many of us, very distracting, right? Very busy. But here's the way that I'm trying to focus on. I'm going to love my wife, and I'm going to raise my kids. That's a focus for me. I'm going to keep my eyes focused towards that. I want to lead my church, and I want to encourage others to do it as well. Very simple purpose. Love my family, love my church, lead those things as God has called me to lead them. And if I focus on that, everything else, because here's the thing about everything else in our lives that we get so busy and distracted and discouraged and worried about, God already takes care of them. You ever notice that? All those things that we worry about and we feel like we need to put some energy into worrying, God's saying, why are you worrying about it? I already have it under control. Just watch where you're going. Keep your eyes on the road. I'll take care of everything else. And he always has. See, that's the thing. If God has not done what he's said he's going to do in my life, I would have reason to doubt. If God has not provided in my life, if God has not fulfilled things in my life, then that gives me a reason to doubt that he will in the future. But God has never failed. God has always been faithful. He's never given me a reason to think that he'll never fulfill me in the future. And I guarantee I can say the same thing about your life. Now, you might say, you don't know my life. You don't know how God has failed me. I can tell you God has never failed you. I can tell you God has done things in our lives. God has maybe changed some directions, but God has always had a purpose and a goal in mind for you. He's always been faithful to you. You are a masterpiece, created to do what he has prepared you to do. You are perfectly created to fulfill God's purpose for you, not to fulfill the purpose of the person next to you. And you cannot win every race, but you can absolutely win yours. There's no comparison to the life God has for you because it is uniquely, wonderfully, awesomely yours. There's no comparison. Let's bow our heads this morning. Maybe you are struggling with some comparison, some envy, some jealousy, whatever you want to call it this morning. And if that's you, that's also a very natural human thing to do. We've all done it, or some of us may be doing it right now. But this is an opportunity for you to refocus and get your eyes fixed back on the goal, on the plan, on the prize that God has uniquely, wonderfully, and awesomely for you. Because when you start comparing yourselves to others around you, then self-doubt starts to come in, resentment starts to build up, and then before you know it, you're completely off the path and off the track that God has laid out for you. There's no comparison. You are his masterpiece. Your life has meaning. Your life has purpose. But our number one purpose this morning is to honor and to glorify our God. And so this morning, if you are a follower of Jesus and there's been a time and a place in your life where you surrendered yourself to Christ and said, I am a sinner, need salvation, forgive me of my sins, come into my heart, redeem me. If that's you this morning, then make sure that you're on the path that you need to be on. Make sure your eyes are not turned towards someone to your left or someone towards your right. Make sure you're focused on what God has in store for you. But this morning also, if you're the other side of this, have never had a time and place in your life where you surrendered yourself to Christ, asked for forgiveness of your sins, that's where your journey begins. That's where your race really, truly begins. God bless us this morning. Encourage us this morning. God, remind us that comparing ourselves gets us nowhere, that we are uniquely, wonderfully, awesomely created by you. Bless us this morning, God. Thank you for this learning. In your name, amen.
Thank you, Pastor. One. There we go. All right. My wife is short. Just a few announcements. Men's Bible study will be next Monday. We're continuing with our study on the end time, so that is Monday at 7 o'clock, next Monday rather. And we do run a Zoom. And if you email at cornerstonembs, men's Bible study @gmail.com, I can send you that Zoom link, or come see me after services. On October 1st, there is the Women's Fellowship. There will be a sign-up sheet next week out there, but if you could save the date for that, it is a great time of Women's Fellowship. We are having a day of service. We're looking to schedule that date, but keep that in mind. That day of service is coming here to Cornerstone, whether that's to paint, to fix things, to organize. It's a great time to fellowship and to come together and work on the sanctuary, work on the church itself. And finally, as we leave today, let us rejoice that we are God's masterpiece and we have a purpose, and let us reflect upon, once again, Psalm 139:14. I will give thanks unto thee, for I, or we, are fearfully and wonderfully made. So let us go with that. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend, and see you all soon.